Okay, we'll get this webinar started. So good evening, Kiara, and welcome to the CIBSE Young Engineers Awards 2022 panel discussion. My name is Pratik Alkesh, and I'm the Young Engineers Network Chair for the Australia and New Zealand region. It is my pleasure to be your host today as we speak to our very accomplished panelists, each of whom were finalists in the 2021 edition of the CIBSE Awards. As we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of all the lands from where we connect today and recognize their continuing connection to the lands, water, and culture. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And I'm in rainy Sydney today, I acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. The 2022 Young Engineers Awards are now open for entries for students, building services graduates, and young and emerging professionals. This year's theme is centered on the planning and designing of ideal buildings of the future. The questions are as follows. For students, it's about what characteristics they would include in an ideal building if they had unlimited resources. For recent graduates, it's about how they would recommend a client to invest in the building improvements with a limited budget. And for young professionals, it's a thought about what kind of buildings would be most important in 2 decades from now. CIBSE ANZ is calling for industry speakers to present at the 2022 ANZ seminar series titled Going from Great to Good. CIBSE acknowledges that the continued performance improvements we are seeing in the building stock is forefront of sustainable design. It should be something we should continue to aspire to. But the stark reality of providing sustainable development for all while staying within our planetary boundaries means we need to find new ways to raise the tide for buildings both old and new. The focus of this series will be implementing sustainable strategies suitable for the majority of buildings. Visit our website on the QR code to find out more about the themes and topics, and feel free to submit an abstract before the 31st of May 2022. And if you have specialized knowledge in any of these topics, we would love to hear from you. Next on, we have a message from our sponsor, Connexus Recruitment. Next slide. All right, so without further ado, let me introduce our panelists for today. We have Arki Elston from Sapien in Melbourne. We have Jane Lai from Airbus in Melbourne. We have Kapil Kumar. Actually, Kapil couldn't make it today, but we'll move on. He sends his apologies. We have Sudhan Pereira from ECS in Sydney, and we have Vivian from Northrop in Sydney as well. So Arki, why don't you tell us a bit more about yourself and the company you're leading?
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you so much. Yeah, so my name's Arki and I work at Sapien, which is my own little company. But winding the clock back a little bit, as I was growing up, I was very much exposed to the theatre industry. My parents put on theatre productions professionally, and I got to be around that space and do some performing and working on theatre as I was growing up. Ultimately, though, once I finished high school, I decided to study engineering. So I was a bit of a white sheep of a black sheep family, very creative family. And then I went into a more scientific STEM-based field because that really interested me. And then, yeah, while I was studying mechanical engineering at RMIT, I started Sapien as well with a couple of friends of mine during our kind of big university summer break. We got that sort of few months. I'd applied for a couple of internships, didn't get them. So I was like, you know what? Got a couple of mates together and we were all really interested in sustainability and energy efficiency and kind of entrepreneurial minded. And so we thought, you know, why don't we have a crack at starting up our own thing? And that's how Sapien was born. And so what Sapien is a company that makes houses more energy efficient. So we just take an existing home and apply very basic energy efficiency principles to it. Things like draft proofing to make the house more airtight, high quality insulation, glazing, downlight replacements, these kind of things. That's what Sapien is focused on. So we got that started, and then Sapien kind of has had a bit of a on again, off again journey as me and my friends who I started it with went on to our own other ventures. So once I finished at RMIT, got my degree, I got a job as a graduate at Oricon doing mechanical services design in the built environment team. And I was there for about 3.5 years, and Sapien kind of got put on the back burner. And I got to work on a lot of great projects. And funnily enough, a lot of those projects were retrofit projects. So kind of similar to what I was doing at Sapien anyway, about making existing buildings better. So some of the projects I got to work on at Oricon were things like Art Centre Melbourne, really iconic building, where they're doing a big kind of reimagining project there. I also got to work a bit on Marvel and the kind of redevelopment of that stadium. And also One Spring Street was another notable one for me, which is a heritage building in the city, where they also had a big kind of redevelopment. So lots of refurbishment and redevelopment work, which comes with its whole array of challenges in itself, working with existing buildings. So about 3 years into working at Oricon, I'd kind of still been working on Sapien in the background, and things had been going well and had been picking up. So I decided, you know what, I want to drop down to 4 days a week at Oricon so that I can spend that extra day a week working on my business. And they were super supportive of that. And 6 months later, I decided to take a year sabbatical from Oricon to work on my business full time. And that's what I'm doing right now. So that's me in a nutshell. So now I just work full time for my own business, Sapien, making houses more energy efficient. And I'm keen to see where that takes me, and got some big ideas for where that's going to end up in the future.
Fantastic. Thanks, Aki. That was a really, I mean, you have a very unique career, and it just shows how many opportunities there are in building services. You know, it's amazing that you're nurturing a passion and being your own boss. So
that's it, living the dream.
Really well done. Amazing. Thanks, Aki. We'll come back to you in a bit. Next up, we have Vivian. Tell us a bit more about yourself and some of the work you're doing at Northrop.
Yes, I'm Vivian. I finished up uni at the end of last year, so I had a few months of experience as a graduate hydraulic engineer at Northrop, which has been really good. I've been working on a few hospital refurbishments. So like Aki said, refurbishments, like working with existing buildings, have its own challenges. So that's really nice and refreshing, something completely different to uni. So that's what I've been working on recently, and I've slowly been able to learn how hydraulics, how we can apply sustainable practices to hydraulics, and how that can really shape the future of building services and buildings. Yeah, so.
Thanks, Vivian. Yeah, well, healthcare is a very, yeah, it's been on our minds for the last 2 years. Probably won't touch upon that too much because it's been discussed to death, but there are obviously so many other challenges even in the healthcare space, and it'd be very interesting to hear your views on that. Thanks, Vivian. Thanks for your time today. Next up, we have a couple couldn't make it, unfortunately, today. So we'll move on to Jane. Jane, tell us about yourself and some of the wonderful work you're doing at Airbus.
Thanks, Pratik. Thank you very much. Can you guys hear me okay?
Perfectly.
Yep, great. Yeah, thanks for that. So yeah, so for me, my background, I did engineering and commerce as my degree at Melbourne University, and I decided to take my engineering degree forward rather than focus on the commerce side of things. And then after that, I went on and did my PhD at the same university. And then I decided to step into industry and get a taste of what working in the consultancy is like. So I joined a building services consultancy firm, and that's basically what URBUS is. URBUS is a building services consultancy company, which means that we consult on how to make anything that's building service related, which is for me, I actually started in the mechanical team, which is very strange for me because my background is environmental engineering. And so for that first year, my learning curve was, basically scaling up the wall at 90 degrees. But after that, they put me in the EST team or / sustainability team. And after that, I just learned the tricks of the trade, learned from senior engineers, went to meetings with directors and very senior people to, learn sort of the softer skills of consultancy, which is, that's something that I recommend everyone to be exposed to get that soft skill in project management and negotiation and meetings as well. At the moment, I'm the sustainability manager at URBUS. I'm leading a team of 9, including myself, across Sydney and Melbourne offices. So we work on all kinds of building, commercial, residential, education, government buildings, etc. We have a lot of projects that we do. So at the moment, I'm working on a private school that's going for Green Star and WELL. So these are Green Star is quite common sustainability rating in the industry, but pair that up with WELL, it's quite special. So that's the space I'm in. I also work on neighbours. So basically, that's looking at the energy efficiency of a building and energy usage. So yeah, on my day-to-day, I look at how to make glazing systems better, facade systems. Advice on materials, I touch on energy, but also water management, waste management, and also the social side. So if you think about ESG, the buzzwords ESG, environmental, social, and governance, I sort of help clients to look at the social and governance side of developments as well. So yeah, so I guess that's me in a nutshell. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jane. That was a really wonderful introduction to how broad our industry is in terms of how many different disciplines and how many different kinds of buildings we touch and we make or we design and we help people interact with. So we'll definitely touch upon that as we go along today. Thanks, Jane, and welcome. Finally, we have Sudhan Pereira from ECS. So Sudhan, tell us a bit more about yourself and some of the work you're doing in the commissioning side.
Thanks, Pratik. So hey everyone, my name's Sudhan. So yeah, last year I was the finalist for the Graduate of the Year for the Young Engineers Awards. So my background is I did a degree in electrical engineering at UNSW, and in my 4th year, I landed a job at a design consultant, LCI Consultants. And so I worked at LCI for about 2 years before moving on. So what I was doing my thesis at the time, and I wrote a thesis on data centers because I did a lot of mission critical work and was really interested in kind of that space. So I decided to move on to commissioning primarily because I wanted to get out onto site and to see the designs really come to life and try to understand, what makes a design good, what are the flaws of that typical design engineers who work in offices may not necessarily see. And that's been a really wonderful experience. So when I joined ECS, the first project that I got, actually I wonder if I can share screen. Yes, I'm going to do that. Give me one minute.
Go for it.
So when I joined ECS, I should quickly introduce ECS. So ECS is a commissioning firm. So we specialize in commissioning management, as well as offering other commissioning processes. So services include like building tuning, commissioning, being a commissioning authority for LEED, which is more of a US-based standard, and other items such as recommissioning. So commissioning typically comes towards the end of the project lifecycle, when things have been designed, when things have been installed, but we do tend to get involved even as early as design to ensure that things are going to be built correctly. Yeah, the very first project that I got involved in was this one, Equinix SY5 Sydney. And I really saw a data center like sort of come to life in front of me, from seeing exposed steel structural beams to having like ceilings getting put in place, seeing generators, UPSs, transformers being towed in, to then actually watching them turn on and start operating. It really was a fantastic experience. Another project that I work on quite regularly is One International Towers. So ECS was the primary commissioning agent for this project. And since then, we are involved in yearly testing of these buildings, and we also manage any kind of tenancies that come online on them. So I'm going to stop sharing now. So I do a lot of work. I do a lot of work in sort of commercial offices and in mission critical, as you may have guessed from that sort of initial background. And it's really a really impressive and difficult challenge, because while my background's in electrical, I really need to know a lot about the other disciplines. And that's something that I find really uncomfortable, just like Jane did, but I still, enjoy it thoroughly. Yeah, so in terms of myself personally, I enjoy bouldering, and I recently got engaged. So yeah, that's me.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sudhan. Thanks for showing us some nice pictures of the projects you're working on. I personally, so I guess I should also introduce myself. So I am a mechanical engineer and a project manager at AECOM, which is also a design consulting firm in Sydney. I primarily work on data center buildings as a project and a design manager. And so I've also experienced what Sudhan has, where you see a building come up from nothing really, or from 2D plans on drawings and 3D models to seeing something on site. It is really fulfilling. Obviously, data centers are designed inside out, and they're designed more to cater to the servers and the racks that are placed inside. So they come with their own challenges, and I found that very interesting. Thanks, Sudhan. Thanks for your time today, and thanks for joining us on this panel. So we'll definitely come back to you and ask you more about commissioning and how critical a role that is in making a building comfortable and efficient. All right, so just a reminder again, so the awards questions for this year are on the screen at the moment. These are quite connected to our seminar series topic for going from great to good in terms of design of buildings. But in the last 2 years, obviously, a lot has changed in terms of how we think of buildings and how we think about spaces in general. And maybe Jane, I wanted to come back to you about the WELL rating you talked about, and some of the other kinds of rating that is out there. I know, Sudhan, you talked about LEED as well. So have you seen an uptake or an increase in requests from clients who want to go for WELL these days? Jane?
Very good question, Pratik. At the end, the short answer is yes. The long-winded answer is there's a big reason for that. The developers are always looking at ways to sort of stand out from the crowd, and one way to do that is to get credentials. Green Star has been around a bit longer than WELL, which means that Green Star is more and more becoming business as usual. which means that to stand out from the crowd, you either have to get a very high rating for Green Star or do something a bit new in industry, which is WELL. Also, that's one reason, but another reason is WELL is very focused on health and wellbeing of occupants. We do spend a lot of time indoors, and I'm not just talking about offices, but, thinking about restaurants and shopping centers, homes, we spend a lot of time indoors. So one way for, those employers to retain talent in their company is to provide a very attractive space for them to come into work. So one of the ways to do that is to be able to promote the fact that the building is, healthy. It would hopefully improve your mood. You've got accessibility to daylight. Nutrition is like a category for WELL, so they've got access to cafes that are, got good nutritional balance in what they offer. It also talks about policy, so how the company looks at, maternity, paternity leave, access to the health facilities. So it's very all-encompassing. And I guess another reason that you've seen uptake in these ratings is because a lot of the companies are looking, it's part of the internal policy now. So for example, tenants, the very top tier tenants, they have in their policy that they need to go into building with said credentials because it aligns with their own sustainability goals and vision. So to be able to, practice what they preach, they need to be able to show stakeholders that they're putting a focus on looking for buildings which are sustainable or, healthy to live in. So yes, that's a long-winded answer.
No, fair enough. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. And as a differentiating factor, LEED and WELL are very well placed for both the tenants and obviously the landlords who can demand a premium in terms of rent, but also tenants who can probably attract talent to come and work in their spaces because they are well and they are well rated, or they are healthier and focus more on well-being. So that's very interesting. But how about some public buildings, like where a landlord's desire to charge a premium for rent might not be of concern or a reason? Are you working on any public buildings that also are going for ratings?
Yeah, there's definitely talks about it. Because WELL is so new, a lot of clients might not know the value of having a WELL certificate, but definitely if you've got clients or, public buildings or operators who doesn't want to go the full suite of, going through the process of getting certification, we see that they like to, pick and choose requirements that meet their needs. So, what WELL was written as sort of like a one-size-fits-all and in an international stage as well. So if you've got buildings that are not catered for sort of the big commercial towers, but they still want to, choose the ones that are relevant to their building. We see clients moving in that direction where it's just maybe an equivalence a rating, or just choosing the requirements that would give the best value to, the product. Yeah.
All about finding the right clients who want to actually go ahead with that kind of stuff. I know we always found that universities were really receptive to new and innovative kind of standards that would bring a lot of utility to a building that didn't necessarily have an immediate commercial payback, because universities aren't trying to build and then sell a building. And so I know some of our university clients were interested in things like passive house, which is really ambitious because there aren't even a lot of passive house buildings in the country. And so, yeah, often it does come down to the clients and how motivated they are to actually really go for these cool standards that can have, a really, really big impact. It's not 100% driven commercially. Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up, Arki, because I was going to come to you and ask you,
obviously Jane's talking about commercial clients, people with big bucks, people who are in the business of spaces. You work with people on the other end of the spectrum. You work with people who are living at home, on their homes rather, right? Who probably have very different commercial motivations, but also require the same level of comfort because we spend the most amount of time at home, right? What are some of the considerations you have heard about from your clients, and also how do you pitch new ideas to them?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's interesting because when we first started the business, we kind of framed it as, this is going to help you save money. And our first service, and still our primary service, is draft proofing. So making the house more airtight. So if you're running the AC, you're not going to lose that conditioned air through infiltration or air leakage. And so all of our original marketing was like, if you do this to your house, it's going to be a lot cheaper to run. And then a few other things. It's also going to be more comfortable. Your carbon footprint will be reduced. And there's also some acoustic benefit as well to draft proofing. And what we found was that most of the people who are prepared to pay for draft proofing didn't care about the payback that much. Most of the people we got, they really cared about being comfortable. And so we had to kind of reframe our marketing a little bit to kind of suit that driver and understand our customers better. And it's a great lesson in not making assumptions on the free market. You have to test your assumptions. And so, most of the calls we were getting, they're like, I sit in my living room and I can feel this cold draft coming when I'm watching TV and it's hitting on the legs and I want to get rid of it and that kind of thing. And so being comfortable was the big driver. And I would say probably the second biggest one is sustainability. So we do get quite a few customers now who are just really interested in reducing their carbon footprint and building, making a home more sustainable, and kind of they're more morally kind of motivated in that way, want to do the right thing. And so, they were the two kind of biggest factors. And whereas trying to save money, that, barely didn't even come in the top two. And that's what we thought people would care about most. So it's interesting. Yeah, definitely test your assumptions. Always test your assumptions.
Well, that is wonderful learning. Absolutely. But like, say, even when you were talking about the money side of things, about saving money, I'm sure the percentage that they would be saving would be in a few tens or at least double digits, right? Like what kind of percentages do you save from draft proofing a house?
Yeah, well, we don't track it, so we don't know specifically, but the conventional literature on domestic homes in Australia is that like 15 to 25% of your winter heat loss is through air leakage. And so, if we've got a house, if we're getting called to a place, we're probably more up around that 25% mark. And, we're not going to get it to zero because that's talking passive house levels. But, if we can get it down to 15, 10% of their winter heat loss from 25, then, there's a 10 to 15% saving on your energy. But I always try, to be honest, when we get feedback from customers, we have got good feedback about energy bills going down. But again, the best feedback we get is my house stays warm or my house stays cool. So we did a place before summer that was quite bad. And they really struggled to keep the house cool during summer with their air conditioning. And we did the draft proofing job. And then on one of those kind of like 30 odd degree days, I got a text message from her. And she was like, hey, I should have done this years ago. I cannot believe how much more comfortable my home is. And that, the aircon isn't like pumping all the time. It'll actually cycle on and off and like cool the house down. And then it'll actually stay cool for a bit because it's not just being frivolously lost to the outside immediately.
Yep.
So no, there are definitely financial savings, but again, our customers are always coming back to us with comfort.
That's perfect. That's brilliant. Yeah, really well done. And that's the best kind of feedback, right? The feedback
Totally
from our clients. And if it's more often than not, we hope it's good. So that's really well done. Thanks, Arki. Yeah, that was some really good insight on how to deal with clients and how to run a business as well. So
totally.
Perfect. But Sudhan, I wanted to ask you about this. Now, Arki's spoken about comfort, Arki's spoken about the human aspect of things. When you're doing commissioning, it's a lot about how to get the most out of the kit, the equipment that's installed, and how to get it running most efficiently. What are some of the conversations you have with your clients about sustainability and the sort?
Yeah, good question. So I guess with commissioning, the reason commissioning is so important is because a lot of times equipment plant just gets put into a building and no one checks it. No one checks that it's actually meeting the design criteria that was spec'd. And we run into this a lot if you've got sort of existing buildings that have never been commissioned. It's just the contractors come in and they put it in. They weren't informed that they needed to do certain things that could optimize the controls of those plant. So I would say first and foremost, there's a lot that can be done with the control system of the plant system. So whether that's through a building management system or whether that's internal to the actual plant equipment itself. Each building is different, so every space needs to have, I guess, the proper due diligence when you're actually working directly with the equipment. Another element is actually how easy it is to operate and how easy it is to work with. So facilities management teams, there's a lot of labor that is spent working with equipment that's just very difficult to work with. So I'll give you one example that in one international towers, it's got a building management system that's really good. It's covering the entire precinct, but they've got tens of thousands of BMS alarms all the time, constantly. And there's no way to sort of, cut that down. It would just require such a massive exercise. So that's the kind of thing, like we've got so many alarms, but were they really necessary? Could we have cut that down a little bit, right? These are the types of questions that when you have someone who's commissioning, who's at sort of the end of the project that's saying, okay, is this actually what we want? Yeah, those are the types of things that you can actually really save on, and they're really valuable to the client across the building's actual, life cycle and operation.
Absolutely, yeah. Commissioning is obviously so critical because otherwise you're not sure whether the design intent is fully maintained and whether what an engineer has designed is going to happen in real life across the different situations a building or a piece of equipment will face. So yeah, absolutely. So did you want to say something else?
I was going to say that it's really a collaborative effort between all the parties, right? If I've got a design specification that's not good, then I can't really do much. To give you an example, I was working on one building where it just called to introduce a UPS, an uninterruptible power system, into the project to essentially back up the essential systems of the building. And the autonomy time wasn't really specified in any strong manner. And as a result, when it was installed, we were told, oh, it's going to have 35 minutes of autonomy. When we go to test it, it actually had 31 minutes. And I go, that's a fail because it's not even achieving 90% of its autonomy time. Well, then I checked the specification and there wasn't any kind of clear requirement here. So the contractor just came back to me and said, oh, sorry, that was a typo. It was supposed to be 30 minutes. And I can't do anything. I just have to pass it. So it's really a collaborative effort. The designer really needs to be on top of their game as well.
Yep. We get reminded all the time, write your specs properly. So sure.
Yep.
So thanks.
Sort it out in construction.
Yep. No, absolutely. Really good lesson there too. So that like we design all these systems, we design all the interfaces, but then if we don't convey that message over to yourselves, and if things get lost in translation, then obviously the end product isn't able to perform as nicely or as well as we intended to. So thanks Sudhan. That's really good learning. And Vivian, just over to you now. So you say you're working on hospitals from a hydraulic perspective. Are any of these conversations occurring in the hospital sector as well? And like, what kind of work do you do?
Yeah, in terms of sustainability, definitely trying to achieve a 5-star Green Star rating is very important. So we're like looking at different options for example, like heating water. We can have like gas heaters, electric heaters, or solar heaters. Solar obviously is the most sustainable or has the least environmental impact. However, you have to like sort of think about what is the best option in terms of costs and everything. So that is like one example of how sustainability would come into hydraulic services. Yeah, that's like one of the main examples I can think of.
No, fair enough. But how about like, I mean, I know you have joined the industry very recently, so I can't ask. You probably don't have a lot of visibility on how things were before COVID, or are you able to speak about that? Have you heard from your colleagues, who work on these projects, who have been working on these projects for many more years, saying, "Oh, our clients probably never used to ask for these kinds of design features prior to COVID hitting." Is there some kind of insight like that that you've come across?
I can't think of anything COVID related, but I would say like the past, like sort of again using a heating water as an example, we would usually past design practices would actually go for gas, because that I guess that there was a transition from like electricity to gas, and now looking at the impact of using natural gas, we're like reverting back to electric heaters. So that is like one example of how we've transitioned from our practices over the years.
Absolutely. No, wonderful. So maybe this is a question for Jane. Jane, I know there's a big push from Green Star to decarbonize buildings and not go for gas or fossil fuels. Does that also extend over to some mission critical buildings such as hospitals?
I'd say what I can say is that the new Green Star tool that just released end of last year does talk about electrifying all the buildings, which they set a different benchmarks depending on which star rating you are adhering to. So if you're going for 6-star, it's basically now everything needs to be electricity based and not fossil fuel based, and then progressively they're going to work backwards with the 5-star and 4-star and then rolling that out later on. So yeah, if it's hospital based or aged care, any buildings which do want a Green Star certification, they will need to adhere to that. But aside from Green Star, even if you see if there are projects that we work on where they're not going for certification, they're still talking about concepts such as this. They want to transition to away from gas and towards using electricity, without really being mandated to. So that's great to see, and that has implications on how we do the HVAC system. Heating and cooling of water as well. So yeah, definitely there's that's very much of a big talking point in projects right now, and in councils as well. There's a lot of conversation around whether that should come into play through some kind of mandatory requirement. But yeah, at the moment we're seeing a push both Green Star projects, but also, just non-Green Star projects as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. And so sounds like we've been talking a lot about new builds, but obviously a lot of this is applicable for existing builds as well. And that kind of touches upon our Graduate of the Year question for this year, wherein we are asking them to think about some improvements that can be recommended to clients. Have you had a lot of experience where clients are coming to you with existing builds saying we want some design changes to raise the level of sustainability, or maybe even get some certification?
Yes, definitely. So we get asked a lot, existing buildings, on how we can get a certification, or just reduce the reduce their sort of electricity bills and energy efficiency. So it's definitely a lot harder compared to new builds, because that's you'd start with a blank page and you can put anything you want, insulation, really thick and really good glazing. Retrofit is always difficult, but yeah, there are ways to do that, and one way is to look at how you can replace inefficient equipment. So if they're nearing the end of life, then that's one way to do it. Controls is another important one, where you really want to make sure that the building is operating as best as it could, given even though it's existing, whether whether lights are turning off overnight, is it still running? Do you have sensors, motion sensors, daylight sensors? It's the control of the HVAC system is very important. But there's a lot of funding out there that encourages existing buildings to upgrade the system, whether it be upgrading to LED lighting, putting solar panels on the roof. There's a lot of funding out there which really pushes into that existing building space.
Oh, interesting. You talk about funding. Okay, and obviously, yeah, undoubtedly, it is a lot harder. I mean, it must be even harder for heritage buildings, for example. I know, Arki, you were talking about working on heritage buildings. Did you come across some really difficult challenges where you had to wonder or think really hard about how to achieve a certain outcome, but holding on to the heritage aspect of the build?
Yeah, absolutely. With heritage buildings, obviously it's imperative that the look and feel of the building is sustained. And often if you're looking at switching from gas-fired boilers in a heating system to electric heat pumps usually take up a lot more space. And, if you want some air source heat pumps, they got to go on the roof. Is the architect going to be happy with that? Or they got to be located outside somewhere. Is the architect going to be happy with that? If they're water source, you got to put more cooling towers somewhere. And so with heritage, when there's space limitations, unfortunately, I believe that gas-fired boilers are still the more space efficient option. But the gas versus electricity debate is a really interesting one for new and existing buildings, and also at the residential level as well. And as far as I'm aware, that the answer is becoming clearer and clearer that we should just go all electric. When you start to compare, especially from a sustainability perspective, like gas is just a non-renewable resource, and electricity can be, if you get it from the right place. And even if you're just getting electricity from the Victorian grid, which is becoming greener and greener, and you compare that to emissions factors for gas alternatives, usually the overall emissions ends up still being similar or slightly less for electricity. But there's a lot of kind of contention around whether gas emissions factors are even accurate in terms of gas leakage that occurs in terms of transporting natural gases, and getting that around. So once you get into the kind of nitty gritty, gas just starts to look worse and worse. And yeah, we see it with Sapien at the kind of residential level as well, the domestic level, where people are wondering what they should do when their gas ducted heating system dies or their gas water heater dies. And there's a couple of great studies that have come out that Renew magazine put together, I think in 2018, about they looked at life cycle cost analysis of replacing various gas elements of the house, whether it's cooking, heating, water, with electric alternatives. And they looked at it from a overall emissions perspective as well, life cycle emissions. And electricity these days is beating gas on just about every front. There were only a few very specific circumstances where it looked like you might consider gas. But yeah, in almost every sense, electricity was winning out. It's just becoming the clearer and clearer alternative, especially as we just add more and more sustainable clean energy to the grid. and as more and more people get solar and battery. So
absolutely. Yeah, I read somewhere that you know, reverse cycle air conditioning units are actually cheaper than having installing like gas furnaces.
100%. Yeah, life cycle cost. Yeah, split systems. Yeah, an efficient split system outstrips gas ducted heating. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's only a matter of time that people start adopting that even more. And then I think once we hit a critical mass, then it's just gonna how do I put it? The effects of the sustainable grid are going to make every other option non-viable almost. So no, that's really good. It's definitely trending in the right direction. So that's perfect. All right. So we are around 15 minutes away we have 50 more minutes for this webinar. So I'm just going to share my screen again, and I invite all the participants or the attendees to send in any questions they might have for our panelists. So just put them in the chat box and we'll have a read through and pick some of the questions for our panelists to answer. But while they do that, maybe I'll touch upon or ask you for some tips for our new, for our potential applicants for this year. So you all presented really well-polished and really thoughtful video submissions last year. Sudhan, do you want to start us off with any tips you might have for the submission?
Yeah, I guess don't be afraid, first of all. Definitely just give it a shot. There's nothing wrong with just trying. I know a lot of people got help from the companies that they work with. They've got, you know, really good marketing teams, and they're always really willing to support you. I actually didn't, because I was a bit nervous about doing that because I just joined ECS. And I thought, well, I actually didn't have that much time to prepare either. So I recorded something just with my work iPhone, and just had it kind of propped up on a bunch of hooks and kind of talked at the camera. It still worked out, obviously, and I've still ended up as a finalist. And I, you know, can't say, you know, how grateful I am to actually have given it a shot. So yeah.
Wonderful. I think that is the first step. Like, a lot of people are hesitant. I myself was very hesitant when I was applying for the award a couple of years ago. And a friend of mine just asked me to go for it. And then my manager was really supportive too. So absolutely, like you said, companies are more than happy to help out. Arki, I think your company helped out. What was your experience there?
Yeah, I got a lot of support from Oricon. It was really good. You know, from brainstorming ideas to the marketing team kind of helping with actually putting the video together and coming up with graphics and music and overlay and that kind of thing. And I mean, another thing, I would absolutely suggest leaning on your company to support you if you're going to, you know, go for the award, because yeah, I mean, the award looks good for you, but it also looks, there's something in it for them too. So, you know, it's in their interest to help you out. But yeah, in terms of the approach to the question that you'll be given, you know, one of the central pieces of criteria is originality and thoughtfulness. And so we really tried to think of out of the box ways to approach the question. And then once you kind of come up with something like that, my advice would be to reach out to experts in your network or in your organization and talk to them about it. So, you know, the one I did, it was all about flexible buildings and how can we make buildings that will adapt to changing needs and stuff. And so we wanted to we try to think what's a different way to come at this, and we try to come at it from the precincts level. But there's a precincts team at Oricon, and I was able to talk to them about all kinds of things related to precincts and how that can actually help. So that, yeah, I would definitely advise doing that. I mean, the other thing I did, and I don't know how much of a factor it played or not, was I did a little bit of research on the judging panel. And so I watched a lot of them had videos, and you can look up our videos to see kind of what we're interested in. And if any of that resonates with you, there are a couple of kind of items I picked up, like someone on the judging panel was really passionate about kind of Indigenous solutions and that kind of thing. And that's something that resonates with me a lot. I thought that was really cool. And so I try to, you know, get that in my submission as well, and find these touch points that are actually going to connect with the judging panel's interests. Yeah. And I mean, the other thing I would say for the video submission is, you know, focus on the assessment criteria. So there's one for presentation skills and clarity and another one on drive and passion. All of that, I feel like those two often get the least amount of love compared to actually just coming up with something original, thoughtful, and the actual ideas. But it's a big part of how you're going to be assessed. So, you know, I come from a theatre background, so whenever I'm filming a presentation or something, I like to do a vocal warm-up, so that gives me a bit of energy. It helps me articulate a little bit better and use my voice a little bit better. And so, you know, hey, take the time, Google a good actor's vocal warm-up, give it a go. It might feel funny, but you might deliver a little bit more strongly. And so yeah, that's my pearls of wisdom.
That's wonderful. I remember seeing Matthew McConaughey's like warm up that made it into the Wolf of Wall Street as well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you do some before today?
I didn't, because I have this bad ulcer on my tongue, so I just smashed a couple of Nurofen and some what's it called, Bonjela, and I couldn't bring myself to do a warm up. Otherwise, I probably would have. But yeah.
Well, you sound just wonderful, and
oh, thank you.
Thank you.
I
appreciate powering through that. I'm sure everyone appreciates that.
That's it.
Thanks,
thank you, Liz.
That's wonderful. Hey, Vivian, how about you? Like, I mean, you know, you were the graduate of the year last year. Oh, sorry, the student of the year last year. How has that brought recognition for you as you start your career?
Yeah, it was quite nice having that opportunity to make this video, and it has also allowed me to meet like a lot of new people like you guys, and I've also had the opportunity to join the CIBSE Young Engineers Committee, so that's been quite nice. In terms of like the submission tips, I would say try something new, take this as an opportunity to learn something new, step out of your comfort zone, because that's like something I did. My background is in civil engineering, and I was an undergraduate hydraulic engineer at the time, but my video focused on like mechanical services, because it's always important that you have an understanding of other services other than the one that you're working in, other than the field that you're working in, because we need to coordinate, it's all interrelated. So that's what I would say in terms of answering your the question for the video.
Absolutely, that's really good advice. Like, don't restrict yourself to what degree you're studying or what your work experience has been. You might have ideas in something totally different. Yeah, absolutely. Like, I remember my own submission video. Like, even though I'm a mechanical engineer, I did take upon the challenge of embodied carbon in data centers, which is a very structural architectural challenge, as in how do we reduce the amount of material, amount of concrete and steel that goes into building a data center, reduce or optimize, or maybe even use different kinds of materials to bring up something. And that was totally different from what I'd studied at university, but I thought it was still something that was very powerful in terms of that year's awards question. So very good advice. Don't restrict yourself to what you think you know. Do a bit more research. Absolutely, wonderful. And Jane, how about you? Like, we remember seeing a photo of all your colleagues sitting with you at the award ceremony. How was that like, and what kind of recognition have you got since?
Yeah, it was fantastic. Obviously, it was we were still doing work from home basis around the time that the awards were happening. So the Melbourne office director basically said, "No, come in and support Jane." Yeah, that's why the photo was taken. They were all most of them came in. Some of them couldn't, they had meetings and site visits, but they came in. There was a bit of food, yeah, they were all there, very supportive. Yeah, definitely in terms of recognition, it's been great. Like like Aki said, the company does does get something out of the submission as well. You know, like you're put in a spotlight, so you know, not only you get recognition as a professional in, you know, sort of LinkedIn space or you know, any social media platform, your company is also getting that same recognition. And obviously, if you are tendering out jobs or you know, going for tenders or you know, going on marketing related, you know, meetings, you know, this is something that you can bring up and say, you know, Jane was a finalist, really, you know, recognized by the industry as someone who's achieved something for the goods and services area. So yeah, definitely, it's been used to you know, do marketing for as a, you know, as an individual, but also from a company point of view. Yeah. I think you're on mute, Pratik.
No, absolutely. Thanks, Jane. That is very good advice. Just reiterating that people should reach out to their company either to, you know, find experts or seek for help in terms of the video submission. Because again, it's not always, it's not often that we do something like this, but anytime we do, it's always good to have help around, and the company does get a lot of visibility out of it because all the finalists do go. So the finalists will be invited to this year's award ceremony in July, which will happen in Sydney. So all the finals will be flown down. There will be a dinner, and obviously that is great networking opportunity as well for all the applicants. So do let other colleagues know, anyone you think who would be eligible for this for these awards. Do let them know. We'll share a link after the webinar, and feel free to send that off. But sticking with you, Jane, we actually have an audience question actually from Vanessa, who asks, what are some of the largest challenges you have faced in trying to convince clients to take up sustainable approaches to design?
Probably cost is one of the biggest challenges. You know, it does take extra money to get the credentials, and even if it's not credentials, you know, implementing requirements without the certification, it adds costs. But obviously there are ways that you can you know, explain to the client that, you know, actually some requirements isn't an uplift to your project costs, and that's because, you know, like for example, if we talk about having low VOC paints, so that's sort of like having paints that are, you know, not harmful to human health, you know, less toxic, you know, ingredients in paints that we use to do interiors of offices or education building or whatnot. You know, whereas 10 years ago there might be a premium because it's not well supplied in the sort of industry, but because Green Star and now Well has been on the scene for a couple of years, suppliers has become a lot more savvy to having products that clients would choose to use on their buildings, because, you know, if a painting supplier has low VOC paint on a Green Star building, that's easily, you know, how many stories is it, like 50 stories, 60 stories of paint, that's a lot of money. So a lot of suppliers are getting really savvy at having their products, you know, certified or, you know, green, it's you know, compared to Green Star requirements, which means that it drives the cost down to, say, target that particular credit. And you can see that throughout the Green Star scorecard, there are a lot of credits which are material based, and a lot of suppliers are on board to supply things that are Green Star friendly. So it's just about talking through that kind of thinking with the client, and maybe doing a bit of a cost analysis, talking with the quantity surveyor on cost estimates. And then, you know, if they see that the overall cost to getting a Green Star certification, for example, it's only a couple of % more than without the certification, then, you know, the benefit is, as you said before, Pratik, attracting a you know, good premium tenants, which means higher lease, you know, rents. So it's just about doing that cost benefit analysis with the client and working through that. But I'd say yes, the same. But like cost is, you know, a big question that always comes up when I'm talking to clients.
Absolutely. And you can bring up a good point that it is not always that it costs extra. It probably costs, sometimes it costs the same, sometimes it even costs less to have a sustainable option. If you look at life cycle cost analysis, like what Arki touched upon as well. So sometimes we've become too short-termist in our thinking, like, okay, it might be less capital intensive to put something, put a kind of equipment that probably has higher operational costs or requires more maintenance, or maybe has more complex commissioning that things might break more often. But if you look at the long term, maybe something that's 10% more expensive now might save you 50% of the cost down the line. Has anyone else on the panel had similar conversations with clients or similar pushback initially?
Oh, every project, mate. Always. So we're engineers. We want to put in kit that's extremely sustainable, and you know, most people that I've worked with in the engineering space are acutely aware of the dangers and risks associated with climate change. But the incentive structure for developers isn't quite there to always fork out the money to get that done. So yeah, there's often a pushback where they're really only just doing just what they need to keep tenants happy or meet PCA grade requirements or Green Star requirements. And, you know, they don't want to do one thing more than they need to hit that requirement. And that's where it comes down to choosing the right clients. Then you get, you know, a university who actually is happy to splash a bit of cash to make something a bit more sustainable. Or we did a refurbishment on 500 Burke Street, which was owned by ISPT, and they're an extremely, you know, sustainable and ethical developer, or at least they strive to be. And so it was actually really unique working with them as a client, in that they were really motivated about achieving ambitious sustainability outcomes outside of just trying to really hit the bare minimum of a certain target or standard.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, choose your clients if you can, sure.
Yeah.
Arki, maybe you have a bit more say there than most, but even when you can't, I think as engineers we are taught to think a certain way. As long as we can communicate that to the client, communicate why we think certain things are better, we normally do get a lot of buy-in from the clients. And that's where awards like the CIBSE awards here, they kind of get us to think a bit outside the box and think a bit beyond our day-to-day job and the scope of our day-to-day job. So not every day would you think about. There's a question actually from the audience, like, what is your definition of a good and better building? Or what makes a building better than another? Now, that's not every day that you think about why what makes a building better than one another, because you're so focused on doing your own job. I think I'll answer that question actually. That is something we want to see from the applicants. Would you agree, panelists? Like, what is it that you think would make a building better than another is basically the question that we're trying to ask. So as long as you can articulate why that metric or that design feature is going to make a building better, we will be very keen to hear that. Would you agree? Thumbs up. Oh.
Yeah. It's a very hard question to answer, to be fair, because there is an element of subjectivity there. And as designers, we need to be very tuned into our clients' goals, and what do they think makes a good and better building. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what people come up with.
Absolutely. We've had some really great submissions in the past, obviously yours included. And it's always interesting to see people come up with their interpretation of the question as well. So even if the question, or if the topic that you've chosen seems a bit irrelevant to the question that you've asked, go for it. You know, explain why you think it's still relevant. Explain what. So this year's questions are around good and great buildings. Explain why you think your take on a good or great building, or your viewpoint is or should be considered, and that still is a very valid submission, I would say. So that was another question there was in the audience question chat. So we are a few minutes over time, and I don't want to hold you all from your Wednesday evening activities, but thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time and for being such a wonderful panel.
Thank you, Pratik.
Thanks
Thanks
very much
everyone
for
for
having
joining.
us.
So thanks to our attendees as well. We will have a recording of this session on YouTube very soon, so you can send it to any of your mates who couldn't make it today, and also look forward to the links that we will post for submitting your applications. The applications are due 12th of May, and we look forward to seeing your submissions then. Thank you so much and have a good evening. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.